Hello students, welcome back. In the last session we have discussed string builder class in Java. In today's session we will discuss vectors in Java. Vectors are used to create dynamic arrays which can store elements of any type and any size. Unlike the regular array where we can store elements of only one type. So we will discuss about vectors in today's session. Let's start. This vector class can be used to create generic dynamic array known as vector, which can hold objects of any type and any number. Remember, this is dynamic array where elements can be added at any time and the size of a vector can be increased. So we can add any number of objects into the vector. And one more important thing about the vector is objects do not have to be homogeneous. Means objects do not have to be of same type. We can add objects of any type and any size. Now how we can create a vector in Java? So vector is created like we create a regular object in Java program. The syntax of creating vector is vector, the class name, the object name int vect is equals to new keyword vector constructor. Now this is the vector declaration or the vector creation with or without size. We are creating a vector here without any size. No size is specified in the vector constructor. So this will create a vector without any size specified. Now we have one more vector declaration here. Vector list is equals to new vector. Here we have passed a size. The size is 3. Means it will create a vector to store 3 objects. But as I have said, anytime we can change this size of the vector. At the time of declaration we may declare a vector without size, but later on the size of a vector can be changed and we can add any number of elements to the vector. Okay, what are the advantages of vector over the array? The advantages like it is convenient to use vectors to store objects. So whenever you want to store objects, it is convenient to use vectors instead of arrays. A vector can be used to store list of objects that may vary in size. So whenever you want to store a list of objects whose size may change, then it is better to use vector than the arrays. For example, if you are creating an array to store integer, the size of int, suppose a system takes 4 bytes to the for the integer data type, then all the elements in that particular array should be less than, or it should not exceed the size that is 4 bytes. We cannot store a long value into the integer array, remember. But in vector we can store objects of any size and even the any type also. One object may be of type integer, another may be of type int, and one more object of type long. Doesn't matter in vector. So whenever you want to store objects of different types, you can go for vectors. We can add and delete objects from the list as and when required. So these are some of the advantages of vector over the array. There is also constraints in using vectors. So constraint in using vector is that we cannot directly store simple data types in vector. We can only store objects in the vector. So vector cannot be used directly to store primitive data values. Vector can only store objects, and that is the constraint in using vectors. Now if you want to store primitive data values into the vectors, you need to first convert those primitive data values into object type, and then you can store those primitive data values into vectors. Now to convert primitive data values or simple data values into objects, we can use something called as wrapper classes. So wrapper classes can be used to convert simple types to objects. Okay, let us discuss some of the important methods of vector class. The important methods of vector class are add element, the first method, list dot add element, which takes item as an argument. Adds the item specified to the list at the end. So this add element method can be used to add items dynamically into the vector. Then we have a method element add, and we are passing the integer value. So this will give the name of the 10th object in the vector. If you want to retrieve a particular object from the vector by passing its index value, then you can use this element add and pass the index value of the element or object, and it will return you that object. So that is method element add. Then we have a method list dot size. Now list here, it is the vector object, remember. So vector object dot size gives the number of objects present in the vector, that is the size of a vector. Then we have list dot remove element. We can delete an element from a vector as well, and we may pass the item name, and if we pass the item name, that item will be removed from the vector. Removes the specified item from the list or from the vector. We have remove element at. Even we can delete an element by passing its position in the vector. In the earlier remove method, we are passing the element itself which we want to remove, and in this remove element at, which takes n as an argument, where we are passing the position of that element. If I say remove element at 10, the 10th element from the vector will be removed. Then we have one more method, that is remove all elements. As the name says, it simply removes all the elements from the vector. Then the method is copy into, and this takes array as an argument. All the elements of a vector can be copied into array as well by using a method called as copy into. But for that, all the elements of a vector should be of same type. So copies all the items from the list to array. Then we have a method insert element at. Now we already had a method that is add element. We have one more, that is insert element at. The difference is add element simply adds an element at the end, whereas insert element can be used to add element at any position in the vector. We may add element at the first position in the vector, or even in between, or at the last position in the vector. So insert element at takes two arguments. First is the item which we want to insert, and second is the position where we want to insert it. So these are some important methods of vector. There are many other methods available in the vector class, but these are some important methods of vector class. Okay, let us see one example program here. This program illustrates use of array, string and vector. This program converts a string vector into array of strings as well and displays the string. So let us look at one simple program to understand working with vectors and arrays. Okay, the first statement in the program, if you look at import java.util.star. Now why we are importing the package that is util.star? This is important because the vector which we are going to use in the program, it belongs to the package that is util package, and that is the reason we have to import java.util in our program if you want to use the vector class, because vector class belongs to this particular package and this is important. So vector belongs to util package. Okay, we have a class that is language vector and the main method. Inside the main method, if you look at, we have created a vector here. Vector, the object name is list, is equals to new vector, and the next line is int length, the integer variable length, it is equals to args dot length. Now what is args? Args, it is the argument which is received by the main method. Main method receives an argument, as we know, and that argument we are using here, args dot length. What exactly we want to do here? Actually what we want to do is we are going to pass some values from the command line. We have already studied one program based on command line. So command line arguments are arguments which are passed at the time of execution of program. Now look at here to understand this. You can see here we are on the left hand side down in the execution part here. We can see we have a command java space language vector. So here we are trying to execute this Java program, but after the program name or the class name, we are passing some values. If you can see here, the values we have passed, which we have passed, it is Ada, Basic, C++, Fortran, and maybe Java after that. So these values which we are passing at the time of execution of a program are set to be command line arguments, and these values will automatically go to the variable that is args. These are stored in args array, remember. And when I say args dot length, this will give us the length of this args, whatever the number of elements which are stored in the args. If you look at here, we are passing, maybe we are passing 1 2 3 4, and again there is one more element, 5 elements to the args. So the length you can consider based on the elements which are passed from the command line. Okay, then all those elements which we have passed from the command line now are stored in args, and those elements we want to copy into our vector, or we want to store those elements into our vector with a name list. How it is done? By using a for loop. For int of I is equals to 0, I is less than length, so length is this length variable I plus plus, and inside this for loop what we have done is list, that is our vector name, dot add element. The method which is used, it is add element, and what we are adding? args of I. Now initial value of I, it is 0, so args of 0, as I have told you, command line arguments are stored in args, it is an array, and the first value from that args, that is args of 0, we are adding into our vector. Now what is the first value? If you look at these values which we have passed, the first value is Ada, remember, and this Ada will be stored in the vector. The vector name is list, and this loop repeats, and every time it repeats, one element is added to the vector. First it will add ADA, then basic, then C++, and so on. So all the elements are added to the list. Now after adding the elements to the vector, next thing what we have done here, you can see list, that is our vector name, dot insert element add. One more method of vector class we have used here. The method is insert element add. This method is also used to add an element to the vector, but we can add element at any position. So here what we have passed a value that is COBOL, and the position where we want to add the item, it is at position 2. Right now at position 2 in the list, it is ADA first we have added, that is at 0th position, basic at the first position, and C++ it is at the second position. But here by using insert element add, we are trying to add COBOL at second position. So all the other elements from the second position are shifted down. So right now at second position we are having C++, but that will be shifted down and C++ will move to the position that is third position. Now what we will have at second position, we will have COBOL over here. Okay, after adding COBOL into it, we are again retrieving the size of the vector here. Int size is equals to list, this is vector variable, dot size, retrieving the size of a vector. And then we have created a string array here. Now string list array, you can see the array brackets here. So we have created string array is equals to new string, and the size of the string array, it is the size of the vector which we have retrieved in the variable size. This we have passed here, you can see. So that will be the size of our string array with the name list array. And after this we are trying to copy all the elements from a vector to the array by using one more method. You can see list dot copy into, the method which is used here, it is copy into, and we have passed our string array with the name list array to the function, so that all the elements from the list are copied into this array. So all the elements we are having in the list array now, and then we are trying to print it by again using one more for loop. Into y is equals to 0, I is less than size, I plus plus system.out.println list array of I. So all the elements from list array one by one it will print. Initial value of I, it is 0, so first it will print element at position 0. So you can see what it has printed, ADA, then it will print the element at position 1, that is basic, then it will print at position 2, that is COBOL, then it will print C++, Fortran and Java. So like this all the elements from the list array will be displayed on the console. Okay, so this program simply demonstrates how we can create a vector and different methods of vector class, how those methods can be used, and also this will demonstrate how we can copy elements from a vector to the array. Okay, that's it for today's session. We will stop here. Thank you.